Hello and welcome to Model Kit Stuff, and welcome to episode 4 of our Endeavour build by Amati. Now in this episode we're going to be tackling figure 3, which is fitting and planking the deck. So let's just run through what the instructions is telling us to do. Glue the deck part 3 using CA glue. Proceed to cover the deck with wooden strips. They're 1 by 2 millimeters, so 1 millimeter deep, 2 millimeters wide. Apply first the central strips starting from the center line, leaving the holes free for the mast and the deck house. So I'm going to use a medium CA for this job, and I find the best thing to do is decant a bit into a container. People use all sorts of things, wax candles and masking tape. I like to use milk bottle tops. There we go. So, having decanted some of my glue, I can then use, this is a bit of wire in an old drill handle, which we can then use to apply our glue around the edges. So we simply go around and apply the glue. Now the glue isn't going to dry. Well, I mean, ultimately it will do if you leave it long enough. But what it's going to do is it's just going to sit there and wait for something to bond to. So you've got a little bit of time to apply this. But, you know, you've not got hours. You don't need to have a bead of glue running the full length. You only need to have it, you can see here I'm sort of like spot welding it in. It's only to hold it in place. It's not going to come under any strain or anything like that. So we don't need to worry too much. So I'll crack on and get this done. Now when we get to the stern, we need to remember that the false deck doesn't go all the way up to the edge. So make sure we've got the glue on the leading edge of this lip. And then make sure you've got a good amount in the bow, because that's the sort of area where it could spring up. So we know that the deck is going to be much closer to the top here. So making sure we've got plenty there to hold that little point of the deck down is important. So there we have it. That is my glue on. So we'll get that well out of our way. And then we can insert the deck. So we're going to make sure that the point of the wood goes right into the point of our hull. And then we're going to just run it round and make sure that that's nicely pressed in. Now what I would recommend at this stage is that you put some weights on it or hold it down or both. So I'm going to put a couple of weights on it, which should just make sure it sits down in the middle, and then I'm just going to hold it down at the stern and at the bow, and give it a moment just to settle into place. So the next part of figure 3 is to plank the deck, and we have a little paragraph of text, and it doesn't really tell us with great detail what we need to be doing. So now we need to get our first 2 planking strips down. So we're going to start by taking the first one, and the first thing I'm going to say is, if they're a little bit fluffy like this, what you want to do is get a little bit of sanding paper and just tidy them up. So just run along the full length and just give them a light going over, just to make sure that there is nothing there that's going to get in the way of getting your planks to fit together and butt together really nice and tightly. There we go. Okay, so we've got a nice cleaned up strip. Now, the instructions tell you to run the strip along the centre line, which we drew in the last episode, and you can see now how that's helping us place this plank with a lot more ease than if we hadn't put the line in. Now, if you didn't put the line in, now's the time to do it before you go any further. It'll be a little bit more difficult though, because you can't get your rule in flat against the deck because of the lips, and that's why we did it in the last episode. So you can do as the instructions say at this point and start gluing your decks down, but if you would like to show the corking on your deck, then there's a little thing we can do before that, and I'd like to see the corking. So the corking is the seal that is between each plank, which on an old sailing ship would be rope covered in tar. So in this instance, what I want to do is show a dark line between each plank, which helps define the planks, and the pattern of the planks, when we do them in the next episode, will really pop out. So to do that, we need to take an ordinary HB pencil and just making sure you get the right side. So the thin edge of your plank, just run a pencil along the thin edge like so. It doesn't have to be really dark, because when you put the next plank against it, which you've also done that with, it sort of doubles the darkness, if that makes sense. So try and get it as even as possible. So you can see I'm just doing a few rubs. Takes no time at all. And we need to do that on both sides. Okay, then we can do that on the other side like I just said. Okay, so that's our first plank ready to be glued down. And what we're going to do is we're going to butt it up into the stern of the ship, just here. So where we've got that lip. Okay. And then make sure we've got it across the line. And do not worry at this stage about the gaps. We'll deal with that after we've laid the plank, not before. And then as we get to the bow, we need to draw on our shape. Now, because we've got this buttered up against the back, it shouldn't move. But what I find is always a handy little thing to do is just mark a point about halfway with your plank. Don't worry about drawing on your plank. As long as you don't press down, you can sand it off. So I'm going to get a little point here and just draw a line and then draw a line on the deck. And that just gives me something to line up with, because as you can see, the plank itself is got a bit of spring in it, so it's moving. So that just means I've got a point to line up to that I know is correct with the back of the plank, the back end of the plank. And then I can keep this in place. And then when we get to the bow here, we want to just draw a line to mark off the end. So we can see where the false deck line is, and we just mark that off like so. So we need now to trim this. So we've got two lines, so we want to draw a line across it, and it's easier to do that because it's so narrow. It's difficult to balance your rule on it, so it's easier to do that if you get some other strips and lay them next to it, and that gives you a bigger area then to lay your rule against. So we'll just lay our rule there and draw our line in. So that should be the line we need to cut. What we will do is we will cut it just slightly long and then sand it slowly to make sure we get it perfectly right. So let's cut that. So if you have a guillotine, I'm using the Amati chopper to do this, then that's a good way of doing it. Alternatively, you can do it with a knife, but this just gives you a little bit more precision. So now we've cut the plank, and we know it won't be perfect at this stage. We put it back on, push our plank to the back, line it up with our mark, and just check our bow. So we're nearly there. So what we're going to do is take a flat file and just take a little bit off, making sure that we've got a nice flat edge and we're not rounding anything off. So hopefully we've got that right now. So I'm just holding it. I'm not worried about aligning the rest of it at this stage. Just holding it right up to the point there, making sure that we've got that nicely done, and we have. So that is ready to be glued in. So let's get this back on our building jig. So I'm going to use CA for this job just because it's quicker, but you can use, if you're worried about having time to get it in the perfect position, you can use aliphatic resin wood glue, and it'll do the job perfectly well. It's important when you've glued your plank down just to wipe away with a damp cloth any excess glue straight away. So you don't want anything drying and stopping two planks butting together, because you'll get gaps in your planking. But because we're using CA, we can put a much more controlled, measured amount on, and it oozes less. It tends to sink in rather than ooze. And we can also do it a bit at a time, which is probably helpful. So we'll just run a little bit of glue onto the plank edge. These planks are quite narrow actually for putting wood glue on, to be honest. So there we go. We've just put a little bit on and we'll just get that nice and square against our line. Like so. And the benefit of using the CA is you've got an instant grab. So that's pretty much already grabbed. Now the strength of the deck comes in putting strips next to each other. So as you put more planks on, it will get stronger and stronger. So I'm now just putting my needle, you can't really see very well, can you? Hold it like that. So my wire with a bit of glue on, I'm just running it underneath. And we'll get that nice and straight. Make sure you've gone right up to the edge where you've got this opening. That's really important because we're going to be cutting there and we don't want anything to come loose. So line that up against my line. Knocking tools on the floor. There we go. So that is glued down up to there. I just going to put a file underneath there just to keep it off the deck while I'm gluing. So once again, glue where we need it. And this time we'll put glue up to the mast opening. And again, plopping it down right against that line, nice and straight. That's lovely. Yep, happy with that. So just the final little bit to do now. So that should be already glued in place. I'll try and keep my arm out of the way. So again, making sure we've got plenty of glue where it overhangs. And we can go all the way up to the tip of the bow now. And once again, make sure you've got plenty right on the end so it doesn't come up. And we should be able to now carefully align that with our line, making sure it's nice and straight. Just press it down and your glue will bond really quite quickly. So that is our first deck plank down. So we're just going to give that a minute. I'll get my glue out of the way so we don't have an accident. So that's gone down nicely. Now before we put our next plank down, we need to deal with the fact that we've covered the holes, and we don't want to do that ultimately. So that is now glued down, nothing's springing back. That's our first deck plank on. So what we need to do is cut these out now. So you can do that with an old pair of cutters. So if you've got an old pair of side cutters, sprue nippers, that's a good way of removing it. If you haven't, then you can just gently cut through it with a number 11 blade. So I'll show you both methods. So we get our nippers in, and we're not going to take it right up to the edge. Going to leave a couple of millimeters there, and do the same here. That removes that piece. Keep your offcuts because you just never know. So that's how we do that. And then if you're going to use the knife method, then what you're going to do is you're just going to score the top, work through it, and slowly work your way through, being careful not to damage your deck. The trouble with doing it in the knife way is you're putting more pressure on the deck, and you run the risk of doing damage, or a greater risk of doing damage than using the nippers. It's difficult to get a saw blade into here, but there are some saw blades that will allow you to get into there. So you could use a saw if you wanted. So now we've cut them down to nearly right, what we can do is it'd be easier to hold the hull for this. What we can do is go in with our file and just file it down smooth. Now this might be a bit noisy, so I'll turn the volume off. Now the important thing is to go in one direction, not to pull up and down, because if you pull up and down, you might rip the wood and bring it back up. So we're just going in one direction, which is into the hole. Then when you're close to the edge and it looks like you're nearly done, just look at it end on, and you'll be and if you notice that you're starting to change the colour of the plyboard, you know you're flat. So you've got to try and keep your file as flat as you can. So I think that's pretty good now, and what we will do when we've put the rest of the planking around it is we'll tidy it all up together so we've got a nice crisp straight edge. So you can leave 0.2, 0.3 of a millimetre overhang and tidy it up when all the planks are there. But for now we've trimmed it back the best we can. We just need to tidy it up when we've finished planking the deck. Now with the circular one where the mast is going in, we're going to use a half round one so that we can get this to form the curve that follows the shape of the cutout. Exactly the same process, just pushing down, filing in one direction. Like so. And again, we can smarten this up when we've got all the planks down. For now, we're just making sure we're not covering the hole up. It just ensures that when we put the next plank on, we can get in to cut that out effectively, is what we're trying to do here. So that is our first bit of deck planking on. What we're going to do now is we're just going to take our sandpaper and just run it along the edge. Make sure we didn't get any glue there that needs to be removed. So that is our first plank on. To do the second plank, we can repeat the process again. This time making sure that we've got the angle going the other way and we're following the deck line again. So exactly the same process. So I'm not going to repeat it on camera. I'll do that off camera and I'll come back to you when it's done. So that's our first two planks on, and if I put this offcut against that plank there, you can see how that really brings the definition of the planks together. And when we start curving these planks and you've got this lovely pretty plank shape, it'll really make that pop out and make it visible, and it'll really help with the overall look of your model. So that's why we do the little pencil trick. It just helps with that definition, and you get a nice thin uniform corking line, which I think is really nice. So there's lots of different ways of doing it, but the pencil way I think works well and is very quick and easy. So that completes episode 4, and so we're able to turn the page, and in the next video we'll be looking at figure 4, and that will be completing the planking. And as you can see, we've got some shaping of planks to do, which, believe me, is easier than it looks. So that's what we'll be doing in the next video. Thank you very much for joining. You enjoy your modelling, and until next time, bye for now. Hi, and thanks for watching. You can support the channel by hitting the like button, and if you haven't subscribed, please consider the subscribe button and the notifications bell so you don't miss any content that I put out. Model Kit Stuff is a self-funded channel, and I don't do membership or Patreon or buy me a coffee. So if you'd like to further donate to the channel and ensure the cameras keep rolling and the content keeps coming, then you can consider making a donation through my PayPal. You'll find a link to that in the text below. You enjoy your modelling, and I'll see you soon.